Mountains don't forgive mistakes. They bury them. That chilling line has echoed through ranger stations and rescue reports for decades. But in the summer of 2003, three siblings from Colorado would discover its truth in the most devastating way imaginable. Their names were Michael, Lisa, and David Harrison. To their family, they were inseparable adventurers, bonded not only by blood, but by an unshakable love for the outdoors. To the world, they would soon become the focus of a haunting mystery. A story about a climb that began with promise and ended in silence, leaving families broken, rescuers baffled, and an entire mountain community questioning how far human determination should ever go. It began innocently, almost beautifully, like most tragedies do. A crisp morning, a sky painted with pale streaks of sunrise, and the three siblings tightening their harnesses, checking ropes, and exchanging the kind of playful banter only brothers and sisters can share. To them, it was supposed to be a symbolic climb, a personal summit that would cement their bond and carve their names, metaphorically, into the unforgiving stone of the mountain. They had trained for months, studied the routes, and memorized weather reports. But nature is never obliged to obey forecasts. And that morning, the same sky that offered a golden promise of safety was quietly preparing its betrayal. Michael, the oldest, was the leader, a firefighter by profession. He was the kind of man others trusted and resilient, and known for making quick decisions under pressure. Lisa, the youngest, carried an almost poetic sensitivity. She loved photography, and her camera dangled at her side, ready to capture the grandeur of jagged peaks and hidden ridges. Then there was David, the middle child, the dreamer, the risk-taker. His confidence often bordered on arrogance, but his optimism was infectious. Together, the three made up a team that seemed balanced, capable, and ready for whatever lay ahead. Their parents had warned them, respect the mountain, don't rush it, don't underestimate it. But as every climber learns too late, warnings are faint whispers when adrenaline is loud. The Harrison siblings weren't professionals, but they weren't novices either. This wasn't Everest, nor K2. It was supposed to be manageable, a challenge. Yes, but one within their reach. The route they chose was ambitious, but doable. A narrow path to the summit that promised panoramic views, stretching across endless valleys. They laughed as they ascended, pausing to take photos, writing quick notes in a small weathered journal Lisa had carried. Their steps were steady, their ropes taut. Nothing about those first hours suggested the nightmare waiting above. But mountains test not only your skill, they test your patience, your humility, and sometimes your very will to live. And on that day, just 150 feet from the summit, the Harrison siblings encountered a force of nature that would consume them whole. The storm came faster than any of them anticipated. By the time the sky shifted from blue to bruised gray, it was already too late. Winds screamed across the ridgeline, tearing at their jackets, clawing at their gear with invisible hands. Hail the size of marbles battered their helmets, bouncing against stone with the sharp crack of gunfire. The rock beneath their boots grew slick, each foothold more treacherous than the last. Lisa, her hands numb, called out that she couldn't feel her fingers. Michael, straining against the gale, tried to reach her, but every move risked being torn from the wall. David, shouting above the deafening roar, made a fateful decision. We can't stay out here. We need shelter now. And that's when he saw it. Through the blinding haze of rain and sleet, David spotted what looked like salvation, a narrow opening in the rock face, almost hidden by the storm's curtain. It was a dark slit, no wider than a doorway, but in that moment, it was the only thing that promised survival. This way, he screamed, forcing his voice through the chaos. The siblings scrambled, hearts pounding, every step a gamble. One misstep, one slip, and gravity would have claimed them right then. But somehow, they made it inside. Instantly, the roar of the storm was silenced. It was as though they had stepped from one world into another. Outside, fury, chaos, and death. Inside, stillness, eerie quiet, and cold. The cave seemed like a gift carved by glaciers centuries ago, smooth and echoing, its air sharp as needles of ice. For the first time in what felt like hours, the siblings could breathe. They could hear each other again. They thought, perhaps, they had cheated death. But the mountain wasn't finished. This cave was no sanctuary. It was a trap, a vertical shaft disguised as a refuge, its floor coated with slick ice, its edges unstable. One step too far, and the abyss yawned open beneath them. Michael, trying to guide his sister further in, slipped. His desperate grab loosened a cascade of rocks. The three were tied together, as climbers often are, for safety. But in this case, that safety became their doom. Michael's fall pulled David. David's weight yanked Lisa, and in a matter of seconds, all three were dragged into darkness, their shouts swallowed by the echo of the void. No one knew it then, but at that very moment, the mountain claimed them. Outside, the storm continued its rampage, dislodging tons of rock and earth. A landslide sealed the cave entrance, as though nature itself had decided to bury its secret. For 20 years, the Harrison siblings would remain entombed in silence. Their story untold. Their fate, a haunting question mark. Families searched. Rescue teams scoured ridges, combed valleys, and traced every route. Helicopters hovered. Dogs sniffed. Volunteers braved snow and wind, but the mountain gave nothing back. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and hope turned into a dull, aching grief. The Harrisons' parents aged under the weight of uncertainty. Was it worse to imagine their children's pain or to live with the not knowing? For 2 decades, the question lingered, eating away at everyone who had loved them. And then, in the summer of 2023, the mountain finally loosened its grip. A young ranger named Jake Morrison, surveying a section of the range, after a small rockslide, stumbled across something unusual. A sliver of fabric, weathered but intact. A fragment of rope, frayed but unmistakably human. He followed the trail, and deep in the shadows, he uncovered what the mountain had guarded for 20 long years. The mystery of the Harrison siblings was over. But the discovery wasn't just closure, it was a revelation. It was a reminder of how fragile human ambition is in the face of untamed wilderness. And it was a warning that some summits extract a price far greater than we are ever willing to pay. This is their story. A story of courage, tragedy, and the unyielding silence of a mountain that kept its secret for 2 decades. The Harrison siblings' journey up the mountain had always been framed as an act of courage, a testament to youthful ambition and the relentless pursuit of adventure. To their friends back home, David, Lisa, and Michael were not just hikers. They were dreamers, chasing something larger than life. David, the eldest at 28, carried the natural air of a leader. He was methodical, practical, but at times dangerously overconfident in his ability to read the wilderness. Lisa, just 20, was the heart of the group, empathetic, cautious, but unwilling to let her fears prevent her from standing beside her brothers. And then there was Michael, 26, whose playful energy disguised a reckless streak. Together, the 3 had always been bound by something unspoken, a sense that no matter how rough the climb, they would face it side by side. In the opening hours of their ascent, the weather seemed almost forgiving. The sky was gray but calm, with a biting wind that teased rather than threatened. Their boots crunched against patches of frost-coated rock as they maneuvered along the narrow trail, the world below them fading into a quilt of mist and shadow. The mountain, with its jagged ridges and sheer cliffs, was both terrifying and beautiful, a paradox of nature's majesty and menace. The siblings moved steadily upward, trading small jokes, adjusting ropes, and sharing the silent satisfaction of being somewhere so few dared to tread. Their backpacks carried the essentials: food rations, sleeping bags, climbing gear, and a weather radio that had promised only mild disturbances later in the evening. Nothing in those predictions hinted at what was coming. By late afternoon, the first warning signs appeared. A ripple of wind, stronger than the last, cold enough to sting their faces. Lisa noticed it first. She paused, glancing at the darkening horizon where clouds gathered like soldiers preparing for war. "David," she murmured, her voice edged with unease. "That doesn't look right, David." Squinting against the gloom, dismissed it with the confidence of someone who had seen storms before. "We're fine. There are natural shelters near the summit. If we have to, we can hunker down there until it passes." He said it with such conviction that both Lisa and Michael nodded, though neither looked entirely convinced. It was a reassurance that would soon prove fatal. Just 150 feet from the summit, everything changed. The storm struck without warning. No gradual buildup, no time to prepare. One moment, the mountain was wrapped in silence. The next, it roared to life with a savagery that defied comprehension. The wind howled at over 50 miles per hour, screaming through the exposed rock face like a living creature. Sheets of icy rain lashed at their bodies, mixed with precise hail that stung their skin and rattled off their helmets. The world became chaos, a maelstrom of sound and sensation where up and down blurred, and every movement felt like an act of defiance against nature itself. Lisa was the first to falter. Her gloves, soaked through within minutes, clung to her trembling hands. She tried to adjust her grip on the climbing rope, but her fingers no longer obeyed. "I can't go on," she cried, her voice nearly lost in the storm's fury. "I'm losing all feeling in my fingers." Her eyes, wide with panic, searched for her brothers, desperate for some anchor against the void that yawned around them. Michael, gritting his teeth, fought to climb closer to her, but the wind was merciless, tugging at his body with invisible hands, threatening to peel him from the mountainside and send him into the abyss below. He shouted her name, his words torn away before they reached her. Behind them, David dug his boots into the rock, his mind racing. He knew they couldn't continue upward, but the path downward was even worse. They were trapped in a deadly limbo, pinned to the wall of the mountain, with nowhere to go. Then, through the swirl of rain and hail, David saw it. A fissure in the rock face, just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. To most eyes, it would have looked like a shadow, easily overlooked in the storm's chaos. But to David, it was salvation. "Follow me," he screamed, his voice hoarse as he gestured toward the opening. Summoning what strength remained, the siblings inched sideways, battling each gust of wind as though it were a living opponent. When they reached the fissure and slipped inside, it was as though the world had shifted. The roar of the storm vanished, replaced by an eerie silence that felt almost unnatural. The cave was deep, its smooth walls whispering of ancient glaciers that had carved it into existence. At first, relief swept over them, the sudden absence of wind, the fragile illusion of safety. But that relief was fleeting. The cave was no refuge. What looked like solid ground at its entrance was nothing more than a slick sheet of ice. Each step carried the risk of disaster, the surface betraying them with every tentative movement. And then came the discovery that would seal their fate. The cave was not a shelter at all, but a vertical shaft, a hidden mouth that dropped into the unseen depths of the mountain. Michael, his nerves frayed, was the first to lose his footing. His boot slipped on the icy surface, and though he reached out desperately, his hand caught only loose rock. The stones gave way, clattering into the abyss with a sound that seemed to echo forever. For one suspended moment, time seemed to stop. Then he fell, the rope connecting him to his siblings snapping taut. Lisa screamed as the force yanked her forward, her body dragged helplessly toward the darkness. David tried to brace himself, his muscles straining, but the weight was too much. One by one, they plunged into the abyss, a tangled mass of limbs and rope swallowed by the mountain's heart. Outside, the storm raged on, indifferent to the lives it had claimed. Hours later, as the fury of nature triggered a rock and earth slide, the fissure sealed itself. The cave entrance vanished beneath tons of debris, as though it had never existed. The mountain became their tomb, silent and unyielding, holding its secret close for 2 decades. In the years that followed, search parties scoured the slopes. Helicopters traced the ridge. Dogs sniffed through snow. Climbers combed every crevice they could reach. But the mountain offered nothing. No gear, no clothing, no sign of the 3 siblings who had dared to challenge it. For their family back home, each day bled into the next, the hope of answers slowly decaying into the quiet ache of uncertainty. Were they alive somewhere, lost and waiting? Or had the mountain swallowed them whole, erasing all trace of their existence? 20 years later, the truth would finally emerge, not through human triumph, but through the mountain's own restless shifting. When a young ranger named Jake Morrison stumbled upon the hidden shaft, long buried beneath layers of rock, he uncovered not just the skeletal remains of the Harrison siblings, but the chilling reminder that in the wilderness, even the best laid plans can dissolve in an instant. The mountain had given them back, but only as echoes of a tragedy frozen in time. Their story became legend, told in hushed tones around campfires and memorial services, a cautionary tale etched into the psyche of all who dared to climb. For some, it was a reminder of nature's supremacy, the brutal reality that no human spirit, no matter how determined, could ever truly conquer the wild. For others, it was something deeper, a haunting parable about love, loyalty, and the thin line between adventure and catastrophe. And as Jake stood there on the edge of the shaft, the silence pressing in around him, he realized something profound. The Harrison siblings had not merely been lost, they had been claimed. The mountain had taken them, hidden them, and only when it was ready had it chosen to give them back. For 2 decades, the mountain stood silent, its jagged ridges and frozen cliffs concealing a secret that haunted the Harrison family and baffled search teams. The siblings' disappearance became one of those stories whispered about in mountaineering circles, a cautionary tale that every climber knew but few wanted to acknowledge too openly. Families hoped, rescuers speculated, and theories multiplied. Some insisted that the 3 had been swept off the summit by an avalanche, their bodies lost forever beneath shifting snow. Others believed they had wandered into some inaccessible crevice where even helicopters and rescue dogs could not reach. Time moved on, but the questions never really left. In the summer of 2022, change came not from human persistence, but from the slow, grinding power of the earth itself. A particularly wet season unleashed landslides across the mountain's face, shifting rocks that had remained undisturbed for generations. And it was there, during a routine patrol of the slope's lower ridges, that a young park ranger named Jake Morrison stumbled across something that didn't belong. At first, it was just the faint outline of climbing rope protruding from a thin crack in the rock. Worn, frayed, but unmistakably human. His breath caught as he crouched closer, brushing away dirt with trembling hands. The rope led into a fissure recently exposed by the landslide, a fissure that yawned open like a wound in the mountain's skin. Inside, the beam of Jake's flashlight revealed the unthinkable. Skeletal remains, tangled together with rusted climbing gear, lay in a heap at the bottom of a vertical shaft. 3 figures, bound not only by rope, but by tragedy. Their clothing, though tattered, still carried faint color. The red of Lisa's jacket, the faded blue of David's, the yellow of Michael's. For a moment, Jake could not move. The silence inside the shaft pressed in around him, heavy with the weight of decades. He knew instantly who they were. The Harrisons had finally been found. News of the discovery spread like wildfire. Within days, forensic teams, rescue workers, and journalists descended upon the site. Cameras rolled as investigators carefully extracted the remains, documenting every rusted carabiner, every ice axe, every torn scrap of fabric. It was not just evidence. It was a story written in fragments, waiting to be pieced back together. The scientists worked with meticulous care, reconstructing the siblings' final moments. The ropes, still tied in knots of desperation, suggested the frantic struggle, as one slip had doomed them all. The position of their bodies confirmed what rescuers had long suspected, that the cave had been a vertical trap, and the storm outside had sealed their fate by burying the entrance. The details were devastating, but they also brought a grim clarity. For 20 years, the Harrison family had lived in the limbo of not knowing. Now, at last, there was an answer. When authorities returned the remains, the funeral was unlike any other. Hundreds of people gathered, some who had known the siblings, others who had only known the story. Photographs of David, Lisa, and Michael, laughing, alive, full of life, stood at the front of the service. Speeches trembled with emotion as friends described their adventurous spirits, their closeness as siblings, and the hole they had left behind. Their parents, older now and carrying the scars of decades of uncertainty, finally laid their children to rest. The grief was sharp, but it was also softened by closure. The mountain had taken them, but it had also, in its own time, returned them. For Jake Morrison, the ranger whose flashlight had first illuminated the hidden shaft, the experience became a turning point. In interviews, he spoke not of triumph, but of humility. "I didn't find them," he said quietly. "The mountain decided to give them back." His words resonated because they captured a truth that every climber, every adventurer, and every grieving family understood, that in the wilderness, human control is an illusion. Nature is not conquered, only borrowed, and sometimes it demands payment. As the story of the Harrison siblings aired in documentaries, news specials, and podcasts, it became more than a personal tragedy. It was a symbol. To climbers, it was a warning, a reminder that the thin line between exhilaration and catastrophe is often invisible. Two families of the missing, it was a bittersweet beacon of hope, proof that even decades later, answers can emerge. And two ordinary viewers, it was a haunting tale of loyalty, love, and the limits of human endurance. Netflix's eventual documentary, Buried by the Storm, framed the siblings' story, not as a simple accident, but as a meditation on risk and resilience. Interviews with rescuers and psychologists painted a vivid picture of how humans wrestle with uncertainty, why we chase danger, and how families survive in the void of unanswered questions. Sweeping drone shots of the mountain contrasted its breathtaking beauty with its brutal indifference, while dramatized reenactments placed viewers in the shoes of the Harrisons. As the storm struck and the cave betrayed them, the narrative was not sensationalized. It was reverent, somber, and profoundly moving. In the closing moments of the documentary, the screen lingered on a view of the summit at dusk. Wind whispered over the ridges, clouds curled around the peaks, and the mountain stood timeless, indifferent, and eternal. A narrator's voice cut through the stillness. The Harrisons went searching for the summit. Instead, they found the truth of the wilderness, that beauty and danger are inseparable, and that some stories are written not in victory, but in silence. For audiences, the story did not end with the credits. It lingered, unsettling, in the quiet moments afterward, because the Harrisons' fate was not just about one family, one storm, or one mountain. It was about all of us, our fragile place in a world that we often pretend we control. And somewhere high above, the mountain remained unchanged, patient, silent, waiting for the next climber who believed they could tame it.